All right, well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's History at High Noon program entitled Breaking Color Lines at the Beach with music journalist, author, and radio host David Menconi. My name is Stacy, and I handle adult education over at the North Carolina Museum of History, and we're so glad that you're joining us for today's program. This program is just one of many exciting digital offerings available through our History at Home initiative. So if you'd like to learn more about those offerings, head over to our website at www.ncmuseumofhistory.org. Before we get started, we would like to take this opportunity to thank our North Carolina Museum of History Associates and Foundation for making today's program possible. Our associates and foundation provide crucial funding and support, which in addition to many other things, helps make programming like today's program happen. If you'd like to learn more about becoming an associates member, we invite you to head over to their website at www.ncmoha.com. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank those of you who graciously donated funds towards today's program. We do our best to keep these series free to attend, but there are costs associated with keeping them going, and we just continue to be so thankful for your gracious support of the museum. A few housekeeping tips for today. We ask that you please keep your mics muted throughout the entirety of the program, and to please type any questions that you have for our speaker into the chat function located at the bottom center of your screen. We also have a special offer as part of today's program. David's new book, Step It Up and Go, The Story of North Carolina Music, which explores roughly a century of the state's music history, can be purchased with a bookplate signed by the author, David, from our museum shop website. Head over to ncmuseumofhistoryshop.com to get your copy. Okay, so now it is my honor to introduce today's speaker, David Menconi. The 2019 Piedmont Laureate covered music at the Raleigh News and Observer for more than 28 years. His new book, Step It Up and Go, The Story of North Carolina Popular Music, from Blind Boy Fuller and Doc Watson to Nina Simone and Superchunk, covers about a century of the state's music history, and as I said, it's available through our museum shop. Okay, David, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It is great to be here. I hope folks will have questions and please type them in. We're going to be talking about this book right here. Although, wow, it's backwards on the screen. Sorry about that. But yeah, Step It Up and Go, The Story of North Carolina Popular Music, from Blind Boy Fuller and Doc Watson to Nina Simone and Superchunk. And as noted, covers about 100 years of North Carolina music history, starting with Charlie Poole's kind of pre-bluegrass old time that he was playing in textile towns in North Carolina about 100 years ago. And it goes basically to the present day. And beach music kind of lands right in the middle of that. The chapter about it is chapter 7 out of 16. And it is called, yes, like today's program, Breaking Color Lines at the Beach, the Embers and Beach Music. I'm going to start reading a section, and I'm hoping some questions come in while I'm doing that. And before I go on to further sections, we'll see if a conversation breaks out. I'd like that to take place more so than me just reading it, folks. I hope you buy the book and read that chapter. But here it is, starting on page 111. You can follow along if you happen to have the book. As far as outdoors in August in North Carolina goes, this 2017 gig wasn't the worst scorcher the Embers had ever endured in 6 decades of gigging. Still, with the late afternoon turning to evening sun beating down out of a hazy sky, temperatures on the stage and out in the crowded plaza at Raleigh's Midtown North Hills Shopping Center registered somewhere between uncomfortable and unbearable. But the band played on, seemingly unfazed, even as they sweated through the matching stage outfits that made them look like a bowling team. Two-tone slip-on loafers and white polyester slacks, topped by red shirts emblazoned with logos for the Embers on one shoulder and Lexington's Hayes Jewelers, the King of Diamonds, on the other. Out front on lead vocals was saxophonist Craig Woolard, the group's primary singer for the better part of 2 decades. But Woolard was still a relative newcomer compared to 77-year-old drummer Bobby Tomlinson, the group's sole remaining original member. Tomlinson always kept things moving in all ways, playing the drums, running the business, even driving the bus, which he did for pretty much the entirety of the Embers' first 60 years, missing only 3 out of an estimated 15,000 gigs at the time of this show. Even getting a cancerous growth removed from the side of his nose a day earlier didn't keep him from his appointed timekeeping rounds on this hot August night. He played with bandages covering the wound. "Ladies and gentlemen," Willard announced, "it's hot enough to be at the beach, so why don't we play some beach music?" Tomlinson queued up a rolling shuffle, unadorned 4/4 time, and nothing fancy, as the Embers horn section started up, and Willard began to sing an old song by the Philadelphia pop soul group The Times. Although it was not one of their biggest hits, like So Much in Love or Wonderful Wonderful, which both cracked Billboard's top 10 in 1963. Instead, it was a song that only reached number 91 on the pop chart and not much higher than that on the soul chart either. In the parallel universe of beach music, however, Ms. Grace is the Times song that resonates the way Twist and Shout does in old-time rock and roll, or Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 in classical. As the essence, it's the most golden of golden beach oldies. "Ooh, ooh, ooh, Miss Grace, satin and perfume and lace, the minute I saw your face, I knew that I loved you. I will spare you my singing voice." You can imagine Craig Willard singing that. Sweat soaking through Willard's shirt and dotting his forehead did not prevent him from selling the song, one hand on the microphone and another reaching for the sky as he sang. Down on the dance floor in front of the stage, meanwhile, about 20 couples whirled about, some with more grace than others. Beach is music of tradition and familiarity above all else for its audience as well as the bands that play it. And what the audience does to beach music is shag, which you might call a dance craze, except most dance crazes don't last for 70 years. The official state dance of both Carolinas, North and South, shagging takes many forms. It involves a wide range of moves, most of them based on a 6-count step, while the pros and experts can shag at a breakneck pace with elaborate athletic choreography. Most amateur dancers shag at the tempo of a leisurely, easygoing lope, with moves you can do one-handed, the better to hold a drink in your other hand. It's a relaxing style of music and dance, steeped in the temporal romance of vacations, parties, and summer loves. "You're wondering where the party is," Willard said a few songs later. "Wonder no more. It's right here at North Hills, and all you got to do is dial 634-5789 to ask." That was the introduction to 634-5789, Soulsville, USA. Still a beach music standard more than a half century after Wilson Pickett put it on the R&B charts. Over the course of a 90-minute set, the Embers also covered Chestnuts by the Spinners and Lou Rawls, plus the obligatory 60-Minute Man, the 1951 classic by the Five Royales' old contemporaries, Billy Ward and the Dominoes, and arguably the #1 beach song of all time. But a lot of the set list consisted of songs that didn't seem like R&B fare, starting with the 1972 soft rock standard Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, and extending into contemporary 21st century hits by the likes of Bruno Mars, Ed Sheeran, and Justin Timberlake. No matter the vintage, however, what every song in the set shared was optimal shag tempo, OST in parentheses, generally somewhere between 110 and 130 beats per minute. That also went for the Embers' own magnum opus, I Love Beach Music, which was one of the few originals they played on this night. A 114 beats per minute beach song about beach music, I Love Beach Music plays like a beach roadmap. It quotes from both 60-Minute Man and Ms. Grace. It has appeared in the coda position at the end of pretty much every Embers live set ever since original frontman Jackie Gore wrote it in 1979. And as they danced the shag to it, the crowd sang along, same as always. I love beach music, always have and always will. There ain't no other kind of music in the world that gives me quite the thrill. So I see a few questions have come in. Do you have any selections to play for us today? Oh, wow. You know, I don't. I could try to fire up the boombox and make that happen, but I fear the audio wouldn't be too great. There's a Spotify playlist I'll put in the comments here in a few minutes that has some beach music songs on there, and maybe that will suffice. Someone says, we like to hear singing. Well, I don't think you'd like to hear mine. And the book does have a discography. It is not a terribly deep discography since it's multi-genre and multi-chapter, and it kind of gives the basics for each chapter, but yes. Is there more than a passing connection between Motown and beach music? Well, yeah, quite a few Motown records are kind of in the canon of beach music. Ultimately, I would define beach music as basically music with some connection to R&B that has that optimal shag tempo. It's music to dance to. And somebody else says, I've always regretted not knowing how to shag. I think I need to put that on my bucket list. Your reading is bringing tears to my eyes. Thank you. You're welcome. The next section gets into the history, where beach came from. That that section was kind of describing it in the present day, typical sort of beach music live event. And here's a bit about where it came from and how it came to be. Shortly after I arrived in North Carolina in 1991, I was talking to my editor at the paper when she said something about beach music. It was the first time I'd heard the phrase, which I found puzzling. And so I responded with a variant of the same question a half-century's worth of clueless transplants have asked. Beach music, is that like the Beach Boys? My editor laughed, emphatically shook her head no, and then became the first but far from last person to bestow that most southern of put-downs upon me. Oh, bless your heart. Truly, that conversation was a gateway to all things North Carolina in more ways than one. As I came to learn, beach music is a curious regional tradition, seemingly frozen in time. Where most music is created by musicians who play it, the early incarnation of beach music was defined and curated by DJs, jukebox operators, and the shag dancers who asked for it in nightclubs. Beach isn't actually a specific style so much as a catch-all label for a tradition that's as much about lifestyle as music. Ask any beach music fan to define it, and the answers might range from old R&B groups like Hank Ballard and the Midnighters to latter-day cover bands like the Embers, or just dance music pasted that ideal shag tempo heartbeat in 4/4 time. It's a big tent that also has room for the likes of Texas Roadhouse blues singer Delbert McClinton, 21st century electro soul duo Gnarls Barkley, and even the occasional old Piedmont blues tune like Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee's shuffling Gonna Move Across the River. However you define it, a lot of beach music's appeal is tied up in nostalgic memories, so lots of classic soul makes the cut. Motown pop and Stax Volt soul, along with the early forerunners of R&B, the stuff that was cleaner than blues but grittier than pop. Scan the listings in the Beach Music and Shag All-Time Top 200, the essential 2010 catalog of the canon as laid out by beach DJ Fessa John Hook and Christopher Beeler. And you'll see the Drifters, OJs, Al Green, Temptations, Four Tops, Platters, and other familiar names. But just as barbecue enthusiasts value the small, out-of-the-way Q-shacks that only they know about, the heart and soul of the beach music pantheon lies in its more obscure songs and artists. Beach originally came into being as an undercover phenomenon, a private club where people passed along whispers of favorite bands, B-sides, and juke joints like secret handshakes. So a journeyman like New Orleans singer-pianist Willie T can be a revered elder in beach music, despite never having climbed higher than number 97 on Billboard's pop singles charts. And that was for 1965's Teasin' You. Beach is a subset of soul where the Clovers are as important as James Brown. And the Embers, a band that has never had a national hit on the mainstream pop charts, is among the biggest in the field. Nowadays, the people who gravitate toward beach music like it because most of the lyrics are uplifting and happy, Embers keyboardist Andy Swindell told me in 2017. It's kind of a culture for older folks who used to love to go to bars when they were younger, and it's not threatening. Early on, however, beach music was anything but non-threatening, and in contrast to the working-class origins of early blues, country, and bluegrass, it came about from middle-class lifestyles and mores. Carrying as it did the intoxicating scent of forbidden interracial fruit, beach music was what suburban white kids had to sneak off to hear across the tracks or listen to on the sly late at night on a transistor radio under the covers. Byproduct of the era of lingering Jim Crow segregation, beach music came about at a time when racial barriers throughout the South were strictly enforced and took considerable moxie to cross. It started with a confluence of circumstances, events, and trends that began to reach critical mass as World War II drew to a close. Between wartime shellac shortages and the 1942 to 44 Petrillo ban in which striking musicians refused to record over royalty disputes. Records were still relatively hard to come by at the end of the war. There was music on the radio, but it was primarily live performance and hillbilly bands. If records were what you wanted to hear, especially race records, one of the few ways to do so was to feed coins into jukeboxes at nightclubs. This was especially true outside the big cities, like the resort areas along the Carolina coastline. For middle-class white kids with an adventurous streak, the cool thing to do on family vacations at the beach was to sneak out to listen to jukebox music at clubs in the African-American parts of town, where you could hear the raw protean likes of Big Joe Turner, Louis Jordan, and Wynonie Harris. That period's nascent R&B acts were a lot livelier than the jukebox selections and the white joints, which were still stuck in Squaresville with orchestras led by Glenn Miller, Harry James, or Les Brown. Back in 1945, the music industry trade magazine Billboard declared, "Swing is dead, bands are out and vocalists are in." The white clubs were firmly stuck in the past. Legend has it that the first crack to appear in this wall of jukebox segregation came in 1946 with the opening of Tijuana Inn, a small nightclub in the coastal resort town of Carolina Beach that was to beach music and New York City's CBGB is to punk rock. Tijuana Inn's proprietor was a former merchant marine named Jim Hanna, and he took the venue's name at the suggestion of one Malcolm Ray Chicken Hicks, a local dancer of legendary renown, a reputation that eventually landed him in the Beach Shaggers Hall of Fame. Hicks's apparent inspiration for the name was that he had just returned from a visit to Mexico. Hanna contracted with the Bostic Music Company from nearby Wilmington to stock the jukebox at Tijuana Inn. And the salient detail was that he and Hicks asked Bostic to bring them the same records by black artists they'd heard playing at jump joints over in Seabreeze, the colored beach resort in the area. Tijuana Inn was just this nothing little hole in the wall, Reverend Billy Wirtz, real name William Wirtz, told me in 2017. But they were the first white-owned place to have the bright idea of putting black records on the jukebox, and people went nuts. That's really where the whole thing started. All right. More questions have come in. Somebody asked about Motown, and I did mention it in that section. So yeah, Motown's definitely a part of the beach music canon. Let's see, someone asking, is there much overlap between beach music and yacht rock? Interesting. Not so much. You know, I'd actually have to think on that. There's a few songs that could pass for yacht rock, like Brandy, which the Embers played at that gig, that are frequently turned up at beach shows. So yeah, maybe so. Certainly lifestyle-wise and vibe-wise. So can you show us photos in the book too? As a matter of fact, I can. Let's see. Here's the Embers, circa 1976, in period-appropriate attire. These are a couple of unidentified shag dancers at Nag's Head in August of 1948. That is a photo I found at the State Archive. They're doing some of the more athletic shag dancing moves. Let's see. That is Jackie Gore on the left and Craig Woolard on the right from the Embers in 2014 when they were inducted into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. And that right there, that is the Winston-Salem R&B group, the Five Royales, from another chapter in the book. Five Royales, I made them chapter 5. And they were one of the key early R&B groups in the 1950s. And they kind of got a second wind out of beach music. So, yeah. So, let's see. When were the Embers allowed to play for white audiences? Well, the Embers being a white group, it wasn't an issue for them. Although, interestingly enough, early version of the group did have an African-American horn player. And Bobby Tomlinson tells the story. In fact, let me just find that real quick because it's kind of funny. How they got around that. Okay. All right. Even though segregation still prevailed in the South, this early incarnation of the Embers was actually integrated. Saxophonist Doug Harris was older than his bandmates and also African American, which meant that getting him into the band and its shows took something of a sales job. I couldn't believe how good Doug sounded the first time he played with us, Tomlinson said, like guys I heard on records. The other guy said, we can't hire him, he's black. This was 1958, remember? When black artists played Memorial Auditorium, I'd have to sit in the balcony while the blacks danced on the lower level. Anyway, when they said we couldn't hire him, I said, yeah, but he's real light. So he was in the band. A year later, we had a gig in New Bern, and I got a call. Somebody told me you had an N-word in the band. No, sir, I said, he's Puerto Rican. That night, and nobody said a word. So, yeah. All right. See. So yeah, anyway, the Embers played for white audiences all along, and it was kind of took a while for the audiences to become integrated, this being the Jim Crow era in the South still. Stuck in Squaresville, love the phrase, thank you very much. You can ask Pandora to play Carolina beach music. Sirius has a beach music channel not available in cars but on other devices, and that is from Ed Weiss, who you may know as Charlie Brown, who figures rather prominently into this beach music chapter, and he had a lot to do with kind of setting the pantheon for the style. Strong Polyester Game, somebody says. Oh, somebody asked for the name of the book. Happy to. Step It Up and Go. The story of North Carolina popular music, from Blind Boy Fuller and Doc Watson to Nina Simone and Superchunk. The beach chapter is chapter 7, kind of right in the middle of it. That's what we're talking about. And it is available from University of North Carolina Press, wherever books are sold. Let's see, is it true the shag shuffle was to prevent getting sand into your shoes? Wow. I'm not sure. That is a perfectly plausible theory, though. I had not heard that one before. Ah, thank you, Stacy. She just helpfully provided the official beach music Making Waves in the Carolina playlist. I should get in a plug for the History Museum's current exhibit on beach music. It's really wonderful. It will be there for almost another year. And it's got all sorts of displays about the music and the listeners and the dancing. You can hear it. There's a really cool video that is a primer on how to shag. So it's like a little class in it. Let's see. Stream 94.9 The Surf, somebody says. There you go. Are a lot of famous beach music musicians in the National Hall of Fame, or have had national recognition? Yes, if you're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Five Royales, who I mentioned, finally belatedly made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 5 years ago, 2015. Unfortunately, it's really too bad it was after they were all passed, but it's great to have them in there. Also, the Drifters, one of the important groups from the R&B pantheon, fronted by two native North Carolinians at different times, Clyde McPhatter at first, and then Ben E. King. They are all in the Hall of Fame as well, and some other R&B acts as well. So yeah, you know, the kind of top end of it, and Al Green is part of acts like that are part of the beach music pantheon, and he's in the Hall of Fame too, obviously. So there is some crossover there. Let's see. All right, since Charlie Brown is with us, I'm going to read the part pertaining to him. And kind of a legendary show in Raleigh. I'm assuming a lot of you folks live in or around Raleigh. All right. When they weren't out working the collegiate circuit, the Embers did their apprenticeship at a South Raleigh nightclub that had country music most nights, where they often served as opening act and house backing band for whatever R&B acts were touring through town. Big Joe Turner, the Drifters, Clarence Frogman Henry, Clyde McPhatter. Some of the acts they backed up needed more help than others. In 1961, a Pittsburgh doo-wop group called the Marcells arrived with the #1 hit single, Blue Moon. But that was pretty much the only song they knew, according to Tomlinson, so the Embers had to work up a set's worth of songs to fill out the show. That's how we got our chops, Tomlinson said, and it was baptism by fire. The group had grown into a solid headliner itself by the mid-'60s, center of a budding business empire that included an Embers nightclub in downtown Raleigh, followed several years later by a second Embers club down at Atlantic Beach. Their following made the Embers a popular opening act for promoters bringing big-name acts to town, which scored them one especially memorable booking, opening for the Rolling Stones at North Carolina State's Reynolds Coliseum. It was November 1965, and the Embers were pretty much kings of the Carolinas. But the Stones' empire was much bigger, and they arrived in Raleigh riding high on their first U.S. #1 hits, I Can't Get No Satisfaction and Get Off of My Cloud. Nevertheless, there were those who said the Embers outplayed the Stones that night, including the News and Observer reviewer, who wrote that the hometown act's opening set, quote, surpassed anything England's native sons attempted, unquote. Given how the Stones had behaved toward them backstage before the show, Jackie Gore found some vindication in that. We turned the crowd on, Gore told me 50 years later. Got 3 standing ovations, and by the time we finished, all the Rolling Stones were standing backstage watching. Then they wanted to meet us after we stole the show. Tomlinson also pronounced himself unimpressed with England's newest hitmakers, which was a disappointment. The Stones were R&B fans too, so Tomlinson figured they could at least talk records. But when the show's promoter tried to introduce Tomlinson to Mick Jagger, the Stones frontman refused to shake hands. I can't believe I'm paying this guy $12,000, the promoter muttered, shaking his head. Who was I to Jagger? Just some guy in a little group opening for him, Tomlinson told me in 2015, shortly before the Stones were to return to Raleigh to play NC State's Carter Finley Stadium. They were already famous, though not like now. It probably bothered me for 30 minutes, but I got paid too, probably $150. All these years later, I'm still in Raleigh driving the band's bus, and they'll probably fly in on a Learjet. And yes, Charlie Brown comes right after that. Someone else who appeared on stage at Reynolds that night in 1965 was MC Ed Weiss, better known by his on-air name Charlie Brown, one of the most important DJs in the beach music universe. Nicknamed after the Coasters' 1959 hit, Brown picked up his first radio experience as a high school student in Norfolk, Virginia, before going off to the University of North Carolina. Weiss arrived in Chapel Hill in 1959 during beach music's early inland invasion phase, and his first exposure to shagging was seeing classmates in his dorm dancing and holding the doorknob, as he told me in 2015. But he quickly realized that beach music was basically the same R&B he'd been playing on the radio. After graduating in 1963, Brown got a job at Charlotte R&B station WGIB, then moved on to Raleigh's WKIX-AM in early 1964, arriving with perfect timing just as Beatlemania was taking hold in the wake of their historic breakthrough on The Ed Sullivan Show. Brown became one of WKIX's Men of Music DJs, with R&B as his specialty. His reputation quickly spread among fans as well as performers like General Norman Johnson, frontman of heritage beach bands The Showmen and the chairman of the board. General Johnson said in an interview once that leaving Norfolk with The Showmen in the mid-'60s and heading south, you'd hear nothing on the radio but how much is that doggy in the window, Weiss said, till you got close enough to Raleigh to hear Charlie Brown playing R&B on WKIX. Like most of his fellow DJs, Brown worked plenty of side hustles off the air, emceeing concerts and high school sock hops across WKIX's listening area. In the late 1960s, Brown approached Atlantic Records with another extracurricular proposition. He'd been talking with Barry Bergman of the Durham-based record bar chain about the early R&B beach music hits, which were important and revered but hard to find. many of them not on full-length albums at all. So Brown proposed that Atlantic released a compilation album of beach music standards. Atlantic executive Jerry Wexler, noting that the Carolinas were a strong sales pocket for vintage R&B among whites as well as blacks, commissioned Weiss to curate two compilations titled Beach Beat. Released in 1967, Volume 1 had a lot of the landmark beach music hits from Atlantic's vaults, starting with Stick McGee's Drinkin' Wine, Spo-Dee-O-Dee, and including multiple songs by the Coasters, Clyde McPhatter, and Willie T. T would also appear on 1968's follow-up Volume 2 with that minor pop hit of his, Teasin' You, alongside Benny King, Barbara Lewis, and other golden oldie shag favorites. Finally, beach music was as caught up with the times as it ever would be. Its essential catalog finally available on the industry standard format. There was even an overseas equivalent emerging around this time, so-called Northern Soul in England, with much of the same music. All right. When did black beach bands begin to play in front of integrated fans? Well, probably, the 1960s, and it's not like it happened all at once and uniformly. But if you ever saw the movie Animal House, the 1978 John Belushi movie about a 1962 vintage fraternity that would party a little bit much, there's a scene in that, the toga party scene, with a band they call Otis Day and the Knights, playing the Isley Brothers Shout, fairly famous scene. Of note, the guitar player in that band was Robert Cray, who in the mid-'80s went on to quite a career playing blues rock. So yeah, scenes like that went on all over the South and the rest of the country as the 60s wore on. I'm not sure I could pin it down. It's funny, like the birth of bluegrass, everybody knows when that was because it was the first time Earl Scruggs played with Bill Monroe, the Grand Ole Opry, December 8th, 1945, and it was on the radio and everybody heard it all at once. So there was like a line crossed. The sort of breaking down of barriers with immigration happened a lot more gradually in fits and starts. And the music came along and helped that along, the music and the dancing. Backing up just a bit. So yeah, you had the beach phenomena start out with all these old R&B records. And it, as I mentioned with the Five Royales, it gave some of those older R&B groups a shot in the arm, and they got a few more years out of it touring and whatnot. As the 60s wore on, those bands were kind of getting past their sell-by date, aging out, dying off, and there was a void. And there was enough demand for beach music on college campuses that there weren't enough bands playing it, and that's why bands like the Embers came along. Bobby Tomlinson and Jackie Gore grew up together. They listened to WLAC out of Nashville playing R&B hits late at night. And they thought it would be great to form a band, and then sensing an opportunity, that's what they did in 1958, and that's how the Embers got started. They were one of a wave of groups that formed around then as the 50s were turning into the 60s, like Catalina's, Band of Oz. Many of these groups are still together today, as are the Embers. Although the Embers membership is completely turned over. Bobby Tomlinson, as I noted in that opening section, was the last original member. And he finally had to bow out about a year or two ago when he had to have knee surgery. He's still involved kind of as their manager and running the business. But yeah, the Embers is entirely second generation and on members at this point. But yeah, they've also got guys in the band that have been there many, many decades. So it's not like they're Johnny-come-latelys. Let's see. Someone says, yep, music can bring us all together. Indeed, it does. Thank you. I haven't attended a beach music performance in a decade or so, but the ones I've been to have been attended by mostly white audiences. Is this typical, or are beach music audiences more diverse these days? In my experience, that's pretty typical. It does tend to be the audience for it. white as opposed to more diverse. So yeah, I would liken the audience for beach music to be along the lines of audiences you see for blues or bluegrass, which tends to be older and white. So yeah. There are younger folks who do like beach music. You will see younger people out there shagging, but I would say from what I've witnessed anecdotally, the audience is more on the older side. Were there any female groups? Wow. Gee, I wish my friend Christy Ward Pita was here. She could answer that question. Yes, but not many. It was primarily guys you'd see up there on the stage. Occasionally you'd see a female R&B singer out there doing it, but not often. What about the Black Beach? I wish Fessa John Hook was here, whose knowledge about all the details is encyclopedic and more so than mine. I'd like to hear more about that. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you. Let's see. Well, I see if any other questions come in. I'll thumb through here and. All right, this is another section about the origins of beach music. It follows right after the section where I quoted Reverend Billy Wirtz talking about Tijuana Inn getting started. Someone asking, what is the geographical area where shagging and beach music were popular? Well, it's all over by now. You know, it started at the coastal towns. Myrtle Beach is kind of ground zero around there, but coastal resort towns up and down the coast, and still very popular there. Nags Head on down into South Carolina too. But it went inland long ago, and there's a thriving beach scene in Raleigh and Charlotte. A lot of the records get recorded in Charlotte too. Let's see. Someone asked along the lines of a couple questions ago, do you think Black beach music artists are in the same bucket as Black country singers? Do you think there's a stigma with being a Black singer in these genres, or is it because these types of music just aren't popular with most Black people? Good question. Yeah, at this point, probably. You know, like General Johnson, African-American gentleman, and was had a hail hearty career in beach music and placed in the Pantheon up until his death. At this point, you don't see that many African Americans on stage playing beach music anymore. Probably about as often as you see Black country singers like Darius Rucker, say. I'm not sure if stigma's the right word. The Black audience tends to be a lot more forward-looking than the white one, if I could generalize just a bit. I mean, especially like with R&B, it seems like African American artists and audiences are always pushing the music forward and leaving the rest of us to kind of catch up. And the African American audience moved away from this kind of old-timey R&B a pretty long time ago, at least, you know, the younger, more engaged, active audience. And, you know, hip hop kind of rules the roost there. So I don't know if it's stigma so much as generational. It's what the older folks are into, and, you know, the kids got their own thing. Of the well-known beach music bands, which ones are from North Carolina? Wow. You know, the Embers, I think General Johnson was more South Carolina. Let's see. Shirelles played Embers Club. This is from Ed Weiss again. Also, exhibit at the museum has great display about the Black beaches. So the person who asked about that earlier, you should make a point of getting down to the Museum of History to see the beach music exhibit between now and next September. So that's cool. Has beach music gotten out of the Carolinas? Not really. It's big around here, and there's pockets elsewhere, but mostly from people who left here and took it with them. And I am not aware of a place that's ever caught on as strongly as it has here. Did Sun Records singers get involved in this movement? Wow. Not really, no. You know, Sun was known for like rockabilly, that early raw stuff, and it was a whole lot more jittery than beach music. I have a hard time imagining shagging to stuff like Mystery Train. Let's see. Brenda Lazarus says it was Hammocks Beach State Park that was established by African Americans since they were not allowed at the white beaches. Thanks for the tip on the exhibit at the museum. We'll check it out. You are welcome. Please do, everybody. Everybody here needs to check that exhibit out if you can get to Raleigh. Continue on for a bit. All right. Going back to the years right after World War II. While the Tijuana Inn proved to be short-lived, it lasted long enough for other white clubs to follow suit. As the 1940s progressed and R&B came into sharper focus as the future of American popular music, Black records continued infiltrating white jukeboxes up and down the North and South Carolina coastline. The music and dancing spread inland to places like the Bladen County town of White Lake, too, as well as larger dance pavilions in Myrtle Beach, Wrightsville Beach, and other coastal towns. With R&B established as what the hipper kids wanted to hear, shagging became the dance of choice. Some accounts date the origins of shag dancing as early as the 1920s, when a young man about town in Wilmington named Lewis Phillip Hall claimed to have invented shagging as a partner dance variation of the general swing style. The Carolina shag was related to the Charleston, Lindybug, Jitterbug, and other popular dances of the jazz age. But shagging truly emerged as a distinctive style unto itself in the 1940s as part of the beach music subculture, when young whites incorporated moves they'd copped during their late-night reconnaissance adventures to the Black Club. Beach music really began as dance culture, Professor John Hook told me in 2017. It started with some white kids down at the beach with the urge to dance in a somewhat different way, a lot of which they picked up from the black folks they'd rub up against here and there. It was new to white people. Very often they'd find the perfect songs to shag to when they flipped over the big national hits. Along with optimal shag tempo, what a lot of the early popular beach songs had in common was overt, unapologetic sexuality. In stark contrast to Perry Como, Dinah Shore, and the rest of the white bread pop mainstream, the ribald, Nebraska-born blues shouter Wynonie Harris would wink, nod, and leer suggestively while singing about his lollipop mama in 1948. To anyone paying the least bit of attention, it was obvious that no, that one was not about candy. For those who loved the music, the dirty blues aspect only added to its forbidden fruit appeal. Beach became a code word for forbidden black culture in the form of this music you'd hear at the beach, said Worths. There were white kids coming down, mingling with all these drifters and beach bums who never settled down after the war, and the music was part of it. In 1949, the same year that Billboard magazine changed the name of its black music chart from race to R&B, Granville Henry Stick McGee, younger brother of Brownie McGee from Durham's blues scene a decade earlier, cut a record that would stand as one of beach music's early signposts. Drinkin' Wine, Spody-Ody was a jump blues ode to good times down in New Orleans, and it was jaunty as well as more than a little silly. But Wine was also irresistibly memorable from the very first listen, and it was perfect for bopping along to show off one's shag moves. McGee had first recorded Drinkin' Wine for another label, but this 1949 version was an early breakthrough for Atlantic Records, which would eventually grow into one of the great American record companies and repository of much of the beach music R&B canon. With 1950 in sight, records were finally beginning to be heard beyond jukeboxes as broadcast radio took hold as a medium for recorded music rather than live performances. One of the most important stations was Nashville's WLAC AM, whose place in beach music is roughly analogous to the role of WSM's Grand Ole Opry in country music. DJ Gene Nobles was at the WLAC studio microphone late nights for his Blues, Boogie, and Barrel House show. spinning the hottest new R&B records and sending them out far and wide over 50,000 watts of clear channel power. The music was targeted at African American audiences, but white kids were tuning in too. Two of them in North Carolina were Bobby Tomlinson and Jackie Gore, who met in 1955 at Raleigh's Hugh Morrison Junior High School. A year later, after Tomlinson turned 16 and got his license to drive, he and Gore would cruise around late at night, listening to WLAC play the Drifters and Hank Ballard, talking about the music and dreaming about putting together a band of their own. In 1958, they finally did. All right. Thank you, Ed. This is from Charlie Brown again. Lots of beach bands other than the Embers are from North Carolina, including Band of Oz, Catalina's, Fantastic Shakers, Jim Quick and Coastline, North Tower, the Holiday Band, Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs, and many more. All right. And a lot of those bands are still at it. And if the plague ever lifts enough for live music to become a thing, you can go see them again next summer, I bet. Are Doug Clark and the Hot Nuts in the list of beach music or more college music? They were a crossover act. They were definitely on that same beach circuit, playing frat houses and whatnot. They weren't strictly beach, but they did fit into that world very neatly. So yeah. Anybody else with a question? All right, we got about 10 minutes or so here left, so I'm going to read maybe one more section, and then I hope a few more questions will pop up. Keep them coming, folks. All right. As the 1970s dawned, beach music's popularity went into a slide that looked like it might be fatal. Many of the old R&B bands were either gone or fading away, while the newer soul generation had moved on to harder-edged funk that was worlds away from the shag paradigm. While Marvin Gaye, the O'Jays, and Curtis Mayfield's Impressions were all heritage beach acts, Backstabbers, Superfly, and Inner City Blues Make Me Wanna Holler just didn't fit the beach format. Beach music just about died in the 70s, said Fessa John Hook. That was as close as it ever came, and there were some lean years for everybody. But disco brought back touch dancing in the late 70s, just as a lot of people who'd been shagging at the beach from the 40s to the 60s became empty nesters. They started going back to the beach again, bumping into old friends and doing the dance where they could. Along with bringing the dancers back, the disco-fueled resurgence of beach music re-emphasized the scene's roots on the dance floor, where beach had originally begun 3 decades earlier. Increasingly, the beach music audience consisted of more stand-up dancers than sit-down listeners, especially when groups like the Society of Stranders formed and began having conventions and gatherings in the early 80s. The rising tide also lifted the fortunes of the beach bands wily enough to focus on the dancers, often with beach music songs about the pleasures of beach music. Fantastic Shakers' Myrtle Beach Days, the Catalina's Summertime's Calling Me, and of course, the Embers' I Love Beach Music. The latter became even more popular after Budweiser used it in a beer spot, leading to a profitable longtime sponsorship. Bobby Tomlinson's never had a cigarette or a beer in his life, noted Andy Swindell, but he'd hold a can and smile during the Budweiser days. While numerous members shuffled through the lineup during the 1980s and into the 90s, original Embers co-founders Tomlinson and Gore remained the constants for more than 35 years. And then it all came crashing down in 1994. For years, tensions had been building between Gore and the rest of the band, especially Craig Woolard. It all came to an ugly head under the worst possible circumstances on stage in the middle of a performance. A dispute that began with a heated exchange leading to a brawl in which Gore hit Woolard upside the head with his guitar just as the rest of the band fired up the I Love Beach Music introductory fanfare to end the gig. Just like that, the show was over, and so was Gore's tenure as a member of the Embers. But it didn't change things all that much. Gore went on to form Jackie Gore, Family and Friends, and Legends of the Beach, sometimes with other Embers alumni in the band. And the Embers themselves continued on too, with members coming and going. After leaving to go solo in the early 2000s, Woolard was back on board as full-time frontman by the time the Embers were inducted into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame in 2014. At the ceremony, the hatchet was buried long enough for Gore to sing on stage with the Embers for the first time in 2 decades. Even after the Embers lineup turned over completely, they kept right on going, busy as ever. Tomlinson finally gave up the drummer's chair after 60 years when a knee replacement forced him into retirement from performing in 2018 at age 79. So he yielded to a replacement drummer and stuck to managing the band's business affairs. But that was always his real gift, knowing how to give the people what they wanted. I'm an average drummer, I know that, Tomlinson told me at that August 2017 gig. But I also know that people dance on the 2 and the 4, not all these fancy fills and rolls and stuff. If the rhythm section puts that down, well, you can dance to it, and it's pleasing to the ear. Sounds like beach music. And that is actually how the beach music chapter in the book ends. So let's see. Are there any young beach music bands and musicians? Wow. Not really. There are younger people who play who have come along and joined beach groups, but you don't really see teenagers forming beach bands in 2020. I mean, you don't see anybody forming bands right now anyway, thanks to the plague, unfortunately. But yeah, it's not something that kids are doing at this point, which leads to the question of what's going to happen. It can certainly continue on for a while with the audience and the musicians it has, but unless those younger people pick it up, it will stop at a certain point. But, you know, beach is often something people come around to when they're later, sort of like, you know, young people who grow up with country music and go off and have a punk rock phase will often come around to country music again as what they grew up with when they get older. And I think it's kind of a similar thing with beach. So with in one way or another, it will continue on as something that's going to be around for a while, I think. Somebody says, looking forward to beach music again in North Hills after COVID, and to which I say amen. I just read the closing stretch of the beach music chapter. The chapter right after that is related to beach music as well. It's the rock band Nantucket, who I didn't really know this until I started getting into research for this book, but Nantucket, who were always seemed like the definitive 70s rock band to me, started out as a beach band. They were called Stacks of Gold, and they formed in Jacksonville, North Carolina in 1969. And they did that. It quickly changed course and became more of a rock band, but they never stopped being a beach band either. They always had a horn section, and a lot of their songs were right in that strike zone for shagging as far as tempo. And in kind of a case of coming full circle, over the past decade, they've gone back to some of that beach music. They made a full album of beach music about a decade ago, You Need a Ride to Raleigh, and they still play that title track, even just on regular non-beach gigs. So yeah, you can take the band out of the beach, but not the beach out of the band. So there you have it. I think we're coming up on the end of this. So if anybody's got any questions, hit me with them. I mentioned the Nantucket chapter just now. There's the chapter on Five Royales too, who are also very important in the beach pantheon. So there's a decent quantity of beach in this band. And again, it's called, looks in reverse, sorry about that, but Step It Up and Go, the story of North Carolina popular music from Blind Boy Fuller and Doc Watson to Nina Simone and Superchunk. So I hope you have an opportunity to check it out, and thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us, David. It was an awesome experience to have you actually read your book to us. That's really incredible. I have a quick question. What, and maybe this is a stupid one, what defines a band as a beach music band? Is it the style of music? Is it the, the instruments used? What exactly, what makes them beach music specifically?
The simplest is just music you can shag dance to. And that tends to be R&B of that certain tempo, generally 110 to 130 beats per minute. So R&B of a sort, oldies R&B, like what you might hear on an oldies radio station. A lot of Motown fits into that, but more current stuff too. Gnarls Barkley Crazy is a song you hear in the beach music world some. And also Texas Roadhouse country blues singer Delbert McClinton. A lot of his stuff is perfect for shagging to. So it tends to be like an R&B band with rather prominent horns, this sort of supper club soul type stuff. That's what most people think of as beach music.
Awesome. Thank you. I was just curious. I grew up listening to it, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what made it beach music. So just curious. As we've said, today's program is part of our newly open exhibit, Beach Music, Making Waves in North Carolina. The exhibit chronicles African-American rhythm and blues boundary crossing teens in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and how they created a culture with its own signature dance, the shag. Its own beloved stars, the Embers, the Catalinas, chairman of the board, and the Tans, just to name a few, and its own rich memories that have endured across the decades. The NC Museum of History, this is one of our newest exhibits. And I believe somebody asked about Black beaches earlier, and thank you, Ed, for commenting. There is a section in the exhibit talking about Black beaches, where they are, how they came to be, all that good stuff. So if you haven't had a chance to head down to the museum and check it out, we invite you to do so. Just want to say thank you again, David, so much, and thank you all of you who joined us today.
All right. Thanks. Hope to see everybody in person sometime soon.
And we'll see you guys later in the month. Take care, everybody.